event to brief MPs and Lords on the Sustainability Index. We want to go through what it is, why it's important, and how it can be implemented by a regulator or even the football authorities if they choose to do so soon. Brief MPs and Lords on the Sustainability Index. We want to go through what it is, why it's important, and how it can be implemented by a regulator or even the football authorities if they choose to do so soon. Brief MPs and Lords on the Sustainability Index. We want to go through what it is, why it's important, and how it... Okay, so we're going to start off with the initial welcome and initial thoughts from Niall Cooper, the CEO of Fair Game. We will be taking questions later, so if you've got any questions, then please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll come to that at the end of the briefing. Over to you, Niall.
Thank you very much. It's worthwhile just pointing out that we have got a couple of MPs that can't make it tonight, but are already offering their full support, and that's Damien Green and Chris Fell from the Conservative Party that have already signed a pledge card that we will come back to later on. Tim Farron is currently delayed in the chamber at the moment, while he's waiting for the annual bill that he's just going through, and is due to join us in a very small amount of time. And then we are also expecting Baroness Taylor to join us shortly. In the meantime, just to put a context about where Fair Game is and what we've come through. We are 34 value-driven football clubs, and we are determined to look at creating a lasting legacy for football. And we have been working closely with experts from across the country in the world of football, and our aim is to produce long-term, realistic solutions to some of the issues that football faces at the moment. And that's always been our mantra. We believe that we have helped develop a solution that can really enshrine some of the recommendations that were found by Tracy Crouch's fan review and take it to another level. And that's in 100% what we are hoping to present today and to take forward on that journey and help you explain that. Now, before we go on, I think it's very important that we take two different views on why it's so important and what it means. So I'm delighted to have with us today Darren Bernstein, who is Director of Bury AFC, and also John Scales, who is a former England international and played for a variety of clubs, including one of which is very close to my heart, Wimbledon, which is probably why I'll have to dash very quickly to try and hop from my way down to Plough Lane to catch Wimbledon Portsmouth later on. But enough of my own problems. Hand over to Darren. Darren, please, if you could tell a bit about your story and why football governance and your reason for getting involved. Darren.
Thanks, Niall. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. So as a quick introduction, I'm a lecturer at the university campus of football business and a director of Bury AFC. So when we reflect on sustainability and the importance of a football club to its community, much has been said about the plight of Bury FC, and the irony of the situation being that Bury's received more attention and more coverage in its demise than it ever did in its existence. And I'd like, if possible, to use this platform to offer an alternative, quite a personal account of what it's like to lose your club and why a club is so important to its community. It's easy to talk about community in a generic, non-specific way, and doing this doesn't always mean we get into the key issues about how it affects people within those communities and why the institution of the football club is so important, and the heritage of a club goes hand in hand with fans and the wider community. Gig Lane is the home of Bury Football Club, and it sits just outside the town centre. The stadium has been there since 1885. It's supposed to be the 11th oldest football stadium in the world. Only 3 other stadia have hosted more Football League matches. It predates the rows and rows of terrace houses that surround the stadium, and in the social consciousness of local people, it's as prevalent to the topography of the ground as the church and the market and the River Irwell. But in any community, its culture is defined by its places and its songs and its rituals and stories of heroes and tragedies. And as such, is there any greater evident arena that this is played out in than a town or city's football club? football clubs, in an age where traditional senses of community are lost and it's being more digital, and the remote sense of what community is, clubs maintain social connections and that sense of place and belonging, and they continually create and refresh these stories and ensure that there's new shared memories for the town, for the club, the supporters, and its wider community. When it stops, more than 90 minutes of football is lost. And if I can, let me explain from a very personal example that I believe truly demonstrates what a community loses when it loses its football club. Towards the end of last year, unfortunately, my father passed away, and he was a supporter of Bury for over 60 years. And he took me to my first game in 1983. And we went everywhere watching the Shakers, and our relationship was forged on predicted scores, team selections, and poring over league tables. We spent hours in cars, on motorways, full of excitement and optimism on the way to matches, and full of disappointment and a sense of being underwhelmed on the way back. But most importantly, forging unbreakable bonds, and that phrase again, shared memories. But this story is not unique to me or to Bury fans, and it's a story that's played out across the nation, where grands and granddads and mums and dads, they pass on that rite of passage of their allegiance to their chosen club down to the next generation. My dad's deteriorating health coincided with the Shakers' implosion, and on that fateful day in August 2019, it stopped just like that. And no more trips, no more long chats, no more new memories. It just stopped. There was a void, and yeah, we still spoke about what I'm not too sure, but we spoke. But I'm not sure we actually talked. Not like we did on the way to a game, and it wasn't the football, it wasn't the actual game of football, but going to the game, so much more is wrapped up in that activity. It was a safe space to talk, where millions of those small interactions that you have make you the person that you are. But August 27th, 2019, that stopped. Fast forward to the start of a talk of a Phoenix club, and that grew, and I decided I wanted to be a part of getting that new club up and running. And following the first season hampered by COVID, the start of this season coincided with my dad's last few weeks, and as his condition took hold, the old dad was back. The words any Bury AFC news meant more than who we've signed and who we're playing. It was a gateway back to that safer place that we used to have. And as he reached his final days, we watched an online stream of a Bury AFC game together, and I was sitting next to him and comforting him with unspoken but the known inevitable of what was going to happen. And it was the last game we watched together. I was holding his hand and reassuringly, and similarly, he'd held my hand as I was a little nipper at my first game at Gig Lane all those years ago, and things had come full circle. And I'm forever grateful that I had a football club. I had Bury AFC back, giving me that second chance to create a lasting memory I otherwise would not have had. And to finish, this is my story, but I'm not a special case. Even today, there's Derby County fans out there probably petrified at the thought that they're not going to get that experience, that shared experience of taking a child or a grandchild to their first game. And it's these collective experiences across a community, or lack of them when they go, that make football clubs so intertwined with the lives of families in those areas, and vital to the civic pride of the communities that those clubs reside in. So thank you for hearing my story. We need to keep the momentum to ensure that the game is governed correctly to avoid any repeat of what happened to my club into the future. So thanks again, Niall, and thanks to Fair Game for all you're doing.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you for sharing that story. And I love that quote that football is so much more than the 90 minutes on the pitch. That's just what it means for everybody. We've now got Baroness Taylor with us, and I'd like to hand it over to her for her observations on football for a couple of minutes.
Okay, thanks, and apologies, I have problems joining. I hope you can hear me. I think the first thing to say is to congratulate Fair Game. They seem to have got further more quickly than many of these previous campaigns, and I certainly do welcome the work that Tracy Crouch has done. I've long wanted more regulation in football, and I've looked at what happens in other countries, and I think we are a long way behind, and we really have got to get this issue of sustainability for the game as a whole. It's fine saying football's a family, but you've got to support the whole family. I said I've got a long-term interest. Obviously, that became a very pertinent one when Bolton Wanderers got into difficulty. And I had a debate here in the House of Lords where we raised all those issues about fit and proper persons, about the way in which football is not regulated, and the people at the top keep it as a sort of magic circle. I do think that the whole point of this campaign is to make sure that the progress that Tracy Crouch has made is not just words and people saying this well done and these are the right things. We've actually got to get something that is fit and proper for the actual purpose, and we've got to be quite bold about the structure that is there. We have got to have proper independent regulation, and I think that any promises that we get will be hard won because the devil will be in the detail, and I think that all of us who are interested in football have actually got to try to make sure that we maximise this opportunity, because I think it really is a good opportunity, because when football gets into trouble, it's not the owners who suffer, it's the fans that suffer, and that lasts for a very long time with them. So congratulations so far, but don't be under any illusions. There's still a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I was still muted then. Thank you very much. And I think we're definitely under no illusion that there's still a lot of work to do, and we plan on continuing to do that. So I'm now going to go to John Scales, one of our ambassadors and former England international, for his take on the need for the change within the game.
Thanks, Caroline, and good evening all. Yeah, I mean, I just want to share my own sort of story of being fortunate to have been and privileged to have played football for all those years, 20 years in the game. You know, it was the last thing I ever thought I was going to do. I was a youngster. I loved my sport. I was a good athlete. But I struggled at school, and I left after my A-levels, and suddenly got an invitation to play at Leeds. And suddenly this whole world opened up to me. And I was incredibly privileged to have the journey that I did through from there down to the 3rd division with Bristol Rovers, who really allowed me to find my feet within the game. And then, of course, a great move to Wimbledon. And within the first season, winning the FA Cup in that famous game of 1988. And, you know, a remarkable story in itself, probably even more remarkable for me. But, you know, it took me on the journey and taught me so much, and gave me such privilege in my life to have played the game, moved to Liverpool and Tottenham and, of course, England. What greater privilege than any player to play for their country. So, you know, I owe the game so much. But I think what I've seen through that time, I suppose you live in a bubble as a player. You're in many ways sheltered from what the game is about, what the game really stands for. You're put within this bubble on a pedestal, and things are done, and you're told to be here, say this, don't say that. It's great that there are more players using their platform for great causes nowadays. But what greater cause than actually, I suppose, sharing what football stands for and what those privileged players should be calling for, which is this sustainable football that we want to see. We want to see the next generation having opportunities to develop their talent, to play at whatever level can fulfill their potential. I'm a great advocate. I've worked with grassroots football with the English Schools FA, put on events across Europe, worked specifically in this country. I've worked with the FA, I've been on the PFA committee, and worked with the Premier League. And throughout all that time, there's undoubtedly been a frustration of mine that there are vested interests, there are conflicts of interest, there are, as Baroness Taylor said there, this sort of magic circle that want to keep this and sort of say everything's great, don't fix what's not broken. But I think fundamentally what we've all come to see is that whilst the game isn't fundamentally broken, it is far, far from as good as it can be. And it's, what do we want good to look like? And I think for me, it's not good enough. The game is far from good enough. I think that everybody shares that who advocates for Tracy Crouch's review, the fan-led review, for what fair game stands for, these value-led clubs that we represent. And it's a privilege to be part of a great group of experts and academics who have helped Tracy in many ways with our work to hopefully shape really what some solutions really are viable, are well thought through, highly considered, practical, and ultimately, you know, the clue is in the name. It's fair. You know, a lot of this is common sense, and you know, in football too often I've seen common sense go out the window. So I think what a great team effort, what a great work everybody's done. Great to be here this evening, and you know, it really is time that you know, this game moves forward, improves itself, becomes fairer, distributes the money better, demands better governance, has the EDI essentially embedded within the principles of how clubs are run. And let's look forward to a brighter future. It will be a difficult ride, but working with all of us together, we've got a great chance.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks for your ongoing support. We're now going to go on to Christina, who's our Director of Policy, who's going to go through the Sustainability Index in more detail, what it is and how it's the core of our recommendations moving forward. Christina.
Thanks, Caroline, and hi, everyone. I'm going to be sharing my screen, so where all goes wrong. Hopefully not. All right. So it all kind of, as we've been talking about throughout the evening, and as kind of you'll have heard from Fair Game throughout this process, we're very much in support of the fan-led review and everything it has to say. For those of you that need a little bit of a refresher, this is the contents page, as it were, and I'll be kind of referring back to it, which is why it's here to begin with. But generally, it covers various elements of financial regulation and good corporate governance. But what we're kind of talking about here is the Sustainability Index, and why do we need something like that? And ultimately, the idea is we want to provide an incentive for clubs to ensure that all of these great recommendations, which are included in the report, actually get taken on board as quickly and with as much input from the clubs as possible. And the way to do that is to incentivize people to get on board. The fan-led review talks about sanctions. So obviously there's a monitoring process prior to breach, real-time monitoring of club finances. If things start going wrong, then there's the short-term naming and shaming, reputational regulation, sanction available, and more kind of long-term things, fines, points deductions, transfer bans, the kind of stuff that is already available in football, which all makes perfect sense. If it continues to go wrong and that doesn't work, they've got the sort of extreme pass the stewardship or control over to an administrator. And kind of worst case scenario, revoke license. So all of these great suggestions. You do need a stick. I do a lot of work around governance, and you definitely need an enforcement section to ensure that people do toe the line. However, what this means is that it's prudential and reactive. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a criticism. We're talking about financial regulation. Financials are backward looking. I'm an accountant. I know this. It's a big problem with the industry. What the Sustainability Index is trying to do is actually incentivize clubs by encouraging them and rewarding good behavior. Okay, and as such, the two can work together. All right. We're not saying that the Sustainability Index replaces anything. It's just a way of incentivizing clubs to actually take on board the recommendations at a faster pace. As kind of John mentioned, it's quite a holistic approach, the fan-led review, and that's absolutely brilliant, and that's what good corporate governance is all about. And what we want to avoid is for clubs to kind of cherry pick what kind of works and what doesn't, making life more difficult for the enforcement section as well. So what the sustainability index does is take 4 areas: financial sustainability, good governance, equality standards, and fan engagement, and use those pillars to incentivize clubs. And those kind of link into the fan-led review. So financial sustainability links with financial regulations and finances and distribution chapters in the fan-led review. Good governance links in with the owners and directors tests and corporate governance section of the fan-led review. Quality standards links directly with the ED&I chapter, and fan engagement links to, well, the fan engagement section and protecting heritage. And those of you that are eagle-eyed will notice that chapters 1 and 2 are missing. Those are the ones of why we need a regulator. So we don't think that actually requires incentivization. Chapter 10 is on women's football and providing the need for an independent review there. So we're kind of parking that. And chapter 11 is on player welfare, a lot of which falls under the academy section. And actually the Premier League academy system is currently undergoing a review of its own. So again, we're sort of parking that. Hence, we've got these 4 areas that we're looking at. How would it work in practice? We'd be looking at those 4 areas specifically. So under financial sustainability, we'd be looking at liquidity and solvency and real-time reporting in line with a fan-led review, quality standards, an ED&I plan tailored to each club. Again, looking at those. Fan engagement, shadow board, or some other measure of fan engagement, and governance kind of splits into 2 sections. So in our manifesto, we talk about structural governance, which is covered in the fan-led review under a Code for Football Governance and the corporate governance section and the owners and directors test. We also talk about environmental governance in our manifesto, which wasn't covered in the fan-led review. But the beauty of the sustainability index is we are just proposing a mechanism to incentivize clubs to get on board more quickly with the recommendations. We are not prescribing exactly what should go in there. We're just giving an example of how it fits in nicely with what's out there already. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass you on to LCP, who are going to discuss how it could potentially work in practice based on what they've seen in regulation. So Bart, are you? I can't see you on the panels.
I'm here, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Christina. So yes, as you said, my role here is to look at how the sustainability index as proposed by Fair Game could actually work in practice, drawing on experience from other regulated industries. So just to introduce myself briefly, I'm a partner at Financial Consultants LCP, and I've been an actuary working primarily in the field of pensions for over 30 years now. But for the last 5 years, I've also been head of football analytics at LCP, working in particular on the development of our innovative player recruitment platform called Transfer Lab. And also last year, I took a part-time CBA on the prestigious football industry's MBA course at Liverpool University, including learning more about football finance from the leading expert, Kieran Maguire. So I think I've probably got quite a unique joint perspective on the fields of pensions and football finance, which I've actually found have a surprisingly large amount in common. I could explain that, but maybe that's for another day. But turning specifically to the area of regulation, the time I've spent working in the pensions industry has been split between periods, first of all, without and then with a regulator, the current pensions regulator having been set up nearly 17 years ago in 2005. And while it's certainly not always been an easy ride, either for the regulator or for the companies and the pension schemes that have been regulated by it, I think it's undeniably the case that the regulator and associated legislation has vastly improved both the financial security and the governance of pension schemes compared with the position before the regulator was established. So based on this experience, I believe the fair game concept of a sustainability index, as outlined by Christina, used for determining how part of the central funding from TV revenues, etc., is distributed to clubs, can be hugely beneficial in improving the promotion of what we call good behaviour in clubs. And this would work in three main ways. First of all, raising awareness within clubs of what constitutes good behaviour, and exactly what this means still needs to be agreed, but I think the recommendations in the fan-led review and the Fair Game Manifesto seem to me to be a very good starting point. And then by encouraging, incentivising and rewarding that good behaviour, and I think reward will be important, as while we hope and indeed expect that doing the right thing will usually pay off over the longer term, there can be material additional costs in the short term that need to be met. And thirdly, by facilitating the sharing of knowledge and experience, which can be in three ways. It can be outwards from the regulator in terms of providing guidance to clubs. It can be sharing between clubs, for example, in roundtable events facilitated by a regulator. And then by feedback from clubs to the regulator on positive initiatives that they've been undertaking. I also believe that having a financial incentive will be really important to ensuring genuine engagement from clubs. Guidance on its own is not likely to be enough, and that the sort of nuclear option of ejecting clubs who don't meet standards is unlikely to be palatable in practice. I also think that self-reporting online by clubs of their own performance in each area, subject to either random spot checks or maybe 3-year audits, is likely to be much more powerful than simply using an external assessment of how each club is performing in each area. As well as being more practical and more cost effective, this has the benefit of raising awareness and engagement by clubs, and also reduces the risk that they regard an external assessment perhaps as being unfair. And the key to this working effectively will be for the outcome of the Sustainability Index assessment and related funds distribution to be seen as fair, and for the system to be seen as reasonably ungameable. In both these aspects, I think it will be important to recognise that no approach will ever be completely fair or completely ungameable. So this will be an exercise of the art of the possible through creating and then evolving an approach which aims to improve over time and adjust to changing circumstances rather than being perfect at the start. But I think the community impact of getting this right can be huge. The Sustainability Index can help make football clubs even more valuable to their community by encouraging and rewarding positive engagement and community actions. And it can also make it much less likely that communities will lose these really important institutions by encouraging the right kind of financial behaviours in clubs. Now, in terms of implementation, in practice, I'd suggest a transitional implementation period starting off in the first few years, perhaps by only having a relatively small proportion of the ultimate level of income distributed based on the Sustainability Index, perhaps 20% in year 1, increasing to 100% in, say, year 5. This will give clubs time to adjust both what they do and how they report what they do, and also give time for the regulator to adjust and fine-tune the system to reflect experience. However, with such a period of transition, I believe it will be really important for the process to begin as soon as possible. And so I view Tracy Crouch's proposal of a shadow regulator to be set up and start working as soon as possible as being very worthwhile and indeed important. So to finish off, here's my visualization of what I've called the virtuous cycle of effective regulation. This is a circular process in which the new independent regulator of English football, IREF, will work in tandem with the Sustainability Index to promote and reward good behaviour by clubs. It starts off at the top with the regulator providing information and guidance to clubs, so to raise awareness and to help them implement better practices, reporting to the new regulator what they're doing and being rewarded financially for good behaviour. And it finishes with a feedback process, so the new regulator can learn from clubs what works and what doesn't work. So the regulator itself can review, refine, update, and improve its guidance and the rules and formulae under which the sustainability index works. I think this cycle works in other industries, and I believe it can also work in football too. So to sum up, I believe the sustainability index as proposed by Fair Game is an impressive and important concept to help promote and reward good practice by football clubs. And while it certainly won't be a simple process, I do believe it can be made to work and will be considerably more effective than any of the obvious regulatory alternatives.
Thank you, Bart. We've got a short video that we're going to play now, but just while we get that set up, if anybody has got any questions, please can you either use the question and answer option or in the chat. We're now going to have a pledge session, and to introduce that pledge, we have a little video from Brian Dean, who's a Fair Game ambassador, current coach and former player. And I'm hoping it will play shortly.
Hi, my name is Brian Dean, and I'd like as many MPs as possible to back the fan-led review and sign Fair Game's pledge card. Thanks very much. It's our game.
Great. So we have, and I'm just double checking, we seem to have lost both our MPs, unfortunately, that were here. We were going to hopefully show them live signing the pledge card, but there will be pledge cards available for MPs to show their support to Fair Game, and we ask that you can get those and download those and sign those and show your support over social media and or through video links as soon as possible. Has anybody got any questions at this stage? Just seen Tracy Crouch saying that she's here. Thank you for joining us, Tracy. I hope you found this interesting. And yes, Tim is here, but unfortunately not on the panelists. Tim, have you got anything you want to share in the chat that I can read out, perhaps to everyone? I haven't got that link, unfortunately, Tim. We've also got representatives from, let me just have a look. We also have representatives from Jess Phillips' office online, which is great as well. And Tracy's just said thank you to everyone who supported Fair Game. And I think we'd all echo our thanks to you, Tracy, for the fan-led review and all the hard work that you and your panel put into that, because you know it's produced a great report, and I really hope that we can get that into legislation. And we have Chris Green MP on as well, so that's great. So it's great to see lots of support from everyone. Has anyone got any questions before we wrap up? Okay, so we've got Damian Green and Simon Felt MP sending their best wishes, and Tim Farron has said that he's proud to support Fair Game, and that our local side, Kendalltown FC, have signed up, which is great to hear. So thank you. It leaves me just to say thank you to everyone for their support and for being here tonight. And a big thank you to Brian Lomax from Bolton Wanderers Supporters Trust for helping us with all the IT. Yeah, thank you for your support. Keep a lookout for those pledge cards. Please get signing them, please share them, and please support Fair Game. If you haven't already signed up for the newsletter, then please make sure you do that as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Caroline.